people who give tutorials online, which you would find interesting. You would be able to work them out. And there are other softwares as well, like Cube, which has, I could show you, there's training in every software. Like I said, webinars are available, there are blogs, and these help quite a lot. There are case studies where they explain exactly how things happen. If you are interested in more uh, specific cases, there are, this is well, complexity explorer, which I found really relevant to the courses which they have based on well, mathematics and transport models. So you would find complexity theories and well, different models which you could just learn and use for your use cases. Or you could contact me about how we could design something specific to our needs and work that part out. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Hi, Pragati.
This is Prashita. I traced my hands.
Mhm.
My question was if you could shed some more light on scenario building, like what are the factors do you consider? How do you tweak the numbers? And
Yeah,
then, like scenarios, a lot of scenarios are possible, right? So, how do you focus on those major scenarios that you want to work on and plan for them?
sure, sure. I'm glad that you're interested. Uh, I have this case published online, and you would be able to have all the scenarios that I've worked out and studied uh, as as a part of this application. Now, let me just explain what was asked and how this could be solved. So, like I said, we have particular variables which we use for our modeling. So, you could say that x into population plus x into employment, or multiplied, in this case multiplied by x into employment multiplied by x into or y into employment, a b c divided by c into cost of transport, gives us the total number of trips. That is how a model is formulated in the form of an equation. And the x, y, z which I mentioned here are these coefficients for the subdivisions that we are considering. And when we input these coefficients for the trip calculation, we can acquire the number of trips on paper. So what I'm trying to say is, if you have scenarios, how would you design those? So like well, we discussed the population. If we have that certain people are moving out of a particular subdivision or moving in because there is a new development which has come up, this would increase the income level maybe for that subdivision, or this would increase the built up area, of course, if number of, or if there is a new colony which is coming up in the subdivision, then how would the trips vary on the streets of the city? That is the scenario which we are trying to work on. This is called a short term uh, demand forecasting. That is, we are taking the data which is current. So, using APIs, we include data which is well, real time, in real time, and say that, okay, if this comes up, this new development comes up, how would the city react to it? Or in the case of COVID, which where we saw a lot of interesting things happening, that people did not want to stay near the place of work, rent apartments near their workplace because they thought that it was costing them a lot and they did not have to go to their workplace and work there. So they shifted from the city center to the outskirts, or even outside of the city to another city perhaps. Then in that case, the population went down for that subdivision. And you can see when that happens, how we could have the public transport for our city, because when people stopped going to their workplaces, the peak times varied drastically, and the city transport was set in such a way that it would cater to the needs of the people during the peak times and as well as on the other times. So here we can see how we can model our scenarios, we can consider situations, we can even find out where we can have which route we can set our public transport for, and at what times, with what frequency, and so on and so forth. We can build cost models where we can say, okay, this is how well people are moving, and so we need to provide to the demand of the supply. And if we are setting policies, like we discussed for the cost of transport, if there is any congestion charge or if there is parking charge, so we can include that in the cost of transport and say, okay, the cost of transport is increased because of parking charge, and which increases the cost of transport and reduces the number of trips, like this graph indicates. When the cost of transport increases, the number of trips goes down. So how much would the cost of transport go down, or the number of trips go down, if I increase the cost of transport? That could be one of the scenarios. And you can see that, or you, if you want to go into how this model was developed, what are the uh, you can find these codes even here in the appendix. Yeah, you can go and check. These are hosted online on IBM Cloud. You don't need to create an account or anything, and you would be able to check the back end and the front end, how they have been coded, if you have an idea of how we work on Python. But
Okay.
yes, if you have any
So
particular scenario,
basically,
you could ask me right now or later.
so from what I understood, like about scenario building, it majorly depends upon what we are aiming for the city, what we are trying to do, what we are planning to do in the next 20 years. And it also depends upon the interdependencies of those two variables, like how a certain change in one of the variable would affect the other variable.
Exactly. Yeah,
Did I
you're
get
right.
it correct? Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
good work.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Harshit.
Harshit this side.
Mhm.
So it's very clear that transport modeling or any kind of modeling is a data intensive job.
Mhm.
And for specifically for Indian scenarios, we majorly are dependent on the primary data collection, which
Mhm.
may show huge amounts of deviation. So
Mhm.
how do we, for specifically for Indian context, what data sources or what kind of methods, or how do we reinvent with data collection so that we can get accurate, more accurate data to model our scenarios?
You're right to the point, and very interesting question. Thank you, Harshit, for asking this. Now, here I've been using mobile data, which has a which is also called as GPS probe data. So you use Google on your mobiles, and while you do that, the Google captures your data for your location. If you're using an Apple phone, it does that all the time because you don't have a setting. If you use an Android, whenever you use it, it captures your data and it tells us in real time which street is congested using the color coding on maps, Google Maps. So this you are able to capture this data, you are able to acquire this data using uh, Google APIs if you just Google it, and you would be able to find out how you can acquire this data, and if you need to pay some amount to acquire this data or not. But if you go in the market and ask the mobile companies, the data which I have used is used or developed by the mobile companies, because they uh, ask the people here if they can acquire their data 24/7, and they have certain uh, well discounts in their mobile prescription and so on. So that data was acquired for this study and used. The company is called Telia, but there are different sources which are available nowadays. If I would I don't know if there's a company called as Autonomo, which provides this kind of data. So all these companies, they have a dashboard where you can uh, maybe purchase their data and use it for your modeling purpose. But for Indian scenario, I would say you have to talk to city officials, because we have cameras, at least in the city which I live, Pune. We, during the smart city initiative, I worked on the city surveillance system, and which was used extensively during the COVID, so that they could geotag people and everything. So you don't have that restriction of GDPR that we have in other countries. So you are able to acquire data if you contact the city officials, or if you're good at some machine learning uh, feature identification tasks, you could acquire the video surveillance and or ask them to run your code and generate the data in that way. But I think Shama ma'am would be able to help you more on this, or your transport teachers would be help you able to help you get this kind of data, or at least tell you more about how you could acquire this for Indian scenario. uh, I hope that I know
Yes,
that
sir.
was not really, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Sorry, I haven't been working in Indian cities at this level.
Good evening, sir.
Hmm.
So my question is related to my thesis. So it's not
Hmm.
directly related to transport modeling, but
Hmm.
my thesis would be around about women's safety around metro stations.
Hmm.
So like there are some factors which affect women's safety. For example,
Hmm.
negative spaces, dead ends, poor lighting, or land use. So can we create some simulations? For example, if we
Absolutely.
increase the lighting or reduce the congestion, how safe will it get for women? So can we do that,
Yes.
those kind of
So
simulation?
what you would need to do now, this is a spatial simulation. So you would be able to do two kind of modeling or simulations, if you can. One is, if you have time series data, you would be able to identify how many uh, incidents or events, crime events, happen in a
Mhm.
particular subdivision of the city, and you could base these number of events on different criteria or parameters, like we have in our study, like the street lightning, or the mm, uh, well boundaries of people's homes, uh,
Okay.
that kind of thing, or road width, or the ratio of the building to road, or even the time of day,
Mhm.
and as much as you can. Just check if these parameters correlate with your data. That is, if uh, if the number of incidents goes up, if the uh, well buildings are too tall and the road is too
Yeah.
narrow, or if they reduce, the number of incidents reduce when we have more number of lights on the streets, that
Mhm.
sort of thing. So this way, for a city subdivision, you would be able to define or identify the uh, your equation mathematical, using some sort of regression analysis, and
Yes.
work on that. Another model which I had in mind was spatial analysis. So you need to think about which place is more prone to these incidents. And once again, coupled with the time series analysis, you could perform this sort of analysis using just your QGIS, because it has certain plugins which you can use for your modeling purposes.
Okay,
But
sir.
yes, this is an excellent example of how you can use modeling to do almost everything, including urban development and crime analysis for your city.
Sure. Thank you, sir. Is there any other software that we can use instead of QGIS?
Yes, yes. Uh, just a minute. Okay, there is a software which is called Crime Stats, and it was specifically developed for this purpose. And for crime analysis,
Okay.
and the person who's responsible for this is a guy from US. But you would need to have spatial data, as in the points where the crime has occurred, as well as all of the rest of the data in parameters. When you feed this data to this software, you will be able to formulate different models and get results out of those. So I'll just paste the link in the chat so that you can find it. Right. But I have worked in this as well. So if you're interested, or if you have any hiccup during your study, connect with me.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome. I guess the time is up.
Yeah, I guess the time is also up, and I think the questions are also exhausted.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was really very nice listening to you, Omkar, and I think
Thank you, ma'am.
people are benefited with this. So, from SPA Bhopal and all the students from third semester master's course, I really thank you for your time and your input here in this case. So, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, ma'am, for
Thank
inviting me. It was a pleasure
Yeah,
to
yeah.
talk in front of you.
It's good to listen to our alumni. We have next session from Deepank, so maybe it is on 10th. So if you wish, you can connect with. I'll send you the link for that.
Yes, yes, yes. If you have any interesting, relevant talks, I
Yeah.
would
So
love
Deepank
to.
also would be talking on something interesting.